You're listening to the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Now here's your hosts, Kevin, Derek, and Alex.
All righty, welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. I am Derek, and I am joined, as always, by your co-hosts, Kevin and Alex. Gentlemen, how we doing?
Doing well. On the road again for the JOB, but I'm glad to be here on a Tuesday night with you guys as we basically wind down June already. Like, holy smokes, has the year gone by?
Last June episode.
Right? Like, a little crazy. So congratulations to the LSU Tigers for winning the Men's College Baseball World Series. Yeah, I think that's kind of the big thing that we missed here that just happened. So
that's it. Yeah. NHL draft happened tonight, I think. I'm pretty sure. Maybe it's tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then the NBA had their draft last Thursday.
They sure did.
That Kevin, when you were talking about On the Road Again, it brought up the old song, the old Roger Miller song, On the Road Again. I also was driving around and heard Jake Owen's new song, On the Boat. So that could be the interesting, debate type of deal. Which one's better?
The one, I don't know who sings it, but the one that's I'm getting drunk on a plane. That one is the winner.
That wasn't an option, but thanks for playing.
Well done, sir. Thank you.
Your choice has been notated and disregarded. Thank you.
I think On the Road is a timeless classic that crosses genre and generation. So at the moment, that takes the cake.
Fair enough. And the On the Boat song is very much just a straight up spinoff, it seems like. So
it's a summer drinking song. Exactly.
Yeah. So Alex, we'll need to educate you. Don't worry, we'll send you the link. Anyway.
Who is that? Who sings that? Getting drunk on it. Is that Dirks?
Yes.
Thank you.
Going down the country music rabbit hole here. We're off to a great start.
We should probably talk football, huh?
We probably should. Speaking of which, we'll likely be moving this show for next week for everybody out there. Quick programming note: the Tuesday show is going to happen to fall like right in between peak firework time, so we'll probably be out enjoying some fireworks displays versus talking football on a live stream. So, but be sure that you're staying tuned into the socials because we'll make the announcements over there. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok at Good Old Boys FF. And then, of course, head over to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/at Good Old Boys FF. Click the subscribe button, ring that bell, get the notifications, and then you don't have to worry. You'll get that live notification. The boys are live. It's time to go. Let's rock. Let's roll. Let's have some fun with it all. Jamie also chiming in here saying, "Yo, what is up, fellas?" Not a whole lot. We are getting ready to talk about some Miami Dolphins, some Jacksonville Jaguars tonight. But before we start getting into team breakdowns here, any thoughts, anything, any news notes, anything like that we should hit up?
No, nothing really. Like Zeke still isn't signed. Dalvin Cook still isn't signed. DeAndre Hopkins still hasn't signed. We will keep everyone abreast of the Tyreek Hill situation, but as we are covering the Miami Dolphins tonight, we're going to, or at least I'm going to cover it as if there's not going to be a suspension. So we will keep everyone up to date if that changes. But for now, PSA, I am doing this as Tyreek will play a full slate of games.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm looking at as well.
Yeah.
So
I mean, and if we don't know otherwise, why treat it otherwise? So as we sit right now, as we're recording this on June 27th, we don't know what any punishment or supplemental punishment or anything about the Tyreek Hill. We do know that there's an investigation and all that. But, as of right now, Tyreek Hill is eligible to participate in all of his team's games. So that's how we're going to approach this.
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and get on into it then. We're going to start here with the Fins down there in Miami. The Miami Dolphins last year, 9-8, a 60% pass, 40% run ratio. They ranked 11th in points for, 6th in yards for. The head coach, Mike McDaniel, entering his second year, and offensive coordinator, Frank Smith, And we're going to go ahead and head right into the running back room, start over there where we always do. Raheem Mostert last year was running back 26, 181 rush attempts, 891 yards, 3 touchdowns, 31 receptions, 34 targets, 202 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Thoughts on Raheem Mostert?
Raheem the Dream. No, I'm just kidding. I think Mostert's still viable if he stays healthy, right? Like, he does play well in this offense. Now, they do have a crowded backfield, right? As we will see as we go through these running backs, the backfield is crowded, but somewhere around 850 yards does sound about right. So you're looking at a flex option, maybe a high-end RB3, potentially a low-end RB2, depending on if he's able to break a couple loose, right, for longer touchdowns. But, really it's going to kind of come down to which running back is garnering the most receptions, right, to kind of help you in your half-point or full-point PPR. And I think it's going to get spread out across all of them, honestly. So I don't know that that's a deciding factor. That being said, he still has some burst. He is a quick running back, right? The Dolphins love speed, and they have tons of speed. So there's big play potential. I like it for best ball, probably a little bit more than what I like it for redraft, just because you don't have to predict those big weeks. You just get to reap the rewards of them. But overall, I think he's going to be given first crack out of the backfield to start the season. We will see how this develops. But going into week 1, I think this is your week 1 starter. Take that as you will.
Yeah, it's very strange. All three, you can make the case for 4, but the 3 of the running backs that we're going to talk about tonight, they're all kind of going, ADP wise around each other, which is kind of, a good thing and a bad thing, right? Like, it's a good thing in that you're not going to spend a ton of draft capital on any one of these guys, because there is a lot of, who is going to take charge in this backfield. But on that same token, because it's, a confusing point in who is going to take charge, if you get the wrong one, you get the wrong one. And that's going to be tough, because, they're not going to be hanging around really for another round or 2 for you to go back. And then you're going to be stuck with kind of like that situation that I was stuck in a couple of years back with the Buffalo running backs, and you couldn't figure out which one was the guy. And I was in the situation where I had both of them, and it seemed like every week I played one of them, and I played the wrong one each week. So that's a headache that you don't want to have. Take it from me. It's a headache you don't want to have. So if you're going to take one, odds are you're not going to get the other one. But if you do, one of the other ones. But if you do, it's going to be a headache that you're going to have to fight week in and week out, because you just don't know, unless you have a direct line to Mike McDaniel, and you just don't know which one's going to be the guy that week. As for Mostert, and really for all of the Dolphins, it's a pretty favorable schedule this year, right? Like, it's not a bad one. Bye week in week 10, their Thursday night game is actually the day after Thanksgiving, and it sets up in a way where they actually aren't playing on short rest in any of those games, because they have a bye week in week 10. They play Sunday, November 19th. Then they play Friday, November 24th, which is essentially a full week's rest, right? And then they play again on Sunday, December 3rd. So they don't ever really have a short week this week. They get that, it's that day after Thanksgiving game that they've got the Black Friday game that the NFL is doing this year. So I think the schedule works out for all of these Miami guys. But, to get back to Mostert, it's a pick your poison with him, because he may be the guy weeks 1, 6, 7, not like, you just don't know which week you're going to get him. So I would say buyer beware when you're drafting a Miami running back, because truth be told, I have no freaking clue which one's going to be the one that week in, week out.
So I know that we're going to be covering all these guys, and we'll get into the others as we go through it. But I think for this season, I would want Mostert, then Devon Achane, and then Jeff Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Yeah.
As we are sitting here, there is no addition to the Miami backfield.
Not
If
yet.
Dalvin Cook, right? I mean, we're going to throw this out there. We know that this is the end of June, right? When we put this out there. So hear me now. If Dalvin Cook is to sign with the Miami Dolphins, it then changes things. It then becomes Dalvin Cook, then Achane, and then whichever running back the Dolphins don't release, Mostert or Jeff Wilson Jr. So this can change. So if you're watching this in the end of August, we understand that things change, but here at the end of June, we're dealing with the information that we have, and that is there is no Dalvin Cook in Miami. So Mostert is number 1, Achane is 2, Jeff Wilson is number 3 in my book.
I like that book. So I'm kind of right there with you as far as how you're going to rank that and how you're going to sort through that one. I like it. So as far as things sit right now, though, Mostert's the guy that I'd rather have out of this backfield, right? And this is a guy that, even looking at last year, he did well in matchups that he should have done well in, and then didn't necessarily pop in the matchups that he shouldn't have done well. So it was a little bit more easy to predict on some of those things as far as, matchup dependent, things like that. But where he's coming off the board now in the 150s, you can absolutely put him on your roster as a 5th, maybe even a 6th running back, and he'll perform probably up in RB3. So I've got no problem putting Raheem Mostert on my roster as even my 5th running back type of thing to have as a depth piece, bye week fill in, and I can play the matchup there. And even at 31 years of age, which that's well beyond where we typically see the plateau and the plateau and these running backs kind of fall apart there, is he's still a guy with a ton of speed and can break a long play and makes those things happen there. So if he's going up against a matchup where that team has had a hard time stopping the run and stuffing the run at the line of scrimmage and has allowed running backs to leak into the second level, like that's a great play for Raheem Mostert to potentially house one.
I got 2 points that I'm going to make, and I'm bringing it up that I have 2 points that I'm going to make in case I forget one of them. The first point, I'll react to what you had there, Derek. You think Mostert ends the season as a running back 3 in top 36?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sure I could be talked into it. I'm sure I could. I don't know that I see it right now. I just don't know that I see it right now. I'm sure I could be talked into it. The second point I wanted to make was how interesting it is that, and I agree with Kevin's list 100%, but like Devon Achane is the guy we want. Like, we just think that he's going to be the second fiddle this year, no matter what. Doesn't matter if it's Dalvin Cook or Raheem Mostert. But like Devon Achane is going to be like that second running back out of this Miami Dolphins backfield that you want. I don't know if it's because of age or because of, what, he presents in terms of his ability, which it seems like, everybody down there in Miami, it's like the Ducks of the late 10s, right? The old Chip Kelly Ducks in Oregon have migrated south to Miami. Because it's just, are you fast? Okay. Can you catch? Okay. You're a receiver. Okay. Are you fast? Okay. Can you catch? No. All right. You're a running back. Like that seems like what Mike McDermott, what McDaniel's got going down there.
This is like what the Raiders have tried to do for the longest time. Only the Dolphins have been successful at it.
Right.
Like,
right.
They're not just taking blazing fast. They have Tyreek and Jaylen Waddle at wideout who have great hands. Right, great hands and run great routes, and they have running backs with tons of speed and that
can also be a threat, to catch out of the backfield, yeah.
So where I worry about this Dolphins team and the running backs in general is pass protection, right? And maybe not as much with the offensive line, but definitely the running back position, as that is what we're talking about at the moment. I am not sure, given their current state of running backs, who is going to be the guy who is willing to step in on a third down and stick their nose in there to pick up a blitz and save Tua from missing games, right?
I mean, realistically, yeah.
Right. So we'll get into this a little bit more with Tua. But this is all part of the reason is not projecting injuries. I think the reason that Mostert can retain RB3 status is because with Tua in games, they're going to be leading in the fourth quarter a little bit more than what they were when Tua had to sit or got kicked out of games and you had Skylar Thompson coming in. Like, they're going to be a little bit – they'll be able to stay more balanced. Their passing game will continue to have teeth as long as Tua can stay under center. But that's a big if, and we'll get to that here later on.
All right. Like, would it surprise you if we look up the end of the season and see Raheem Mostert 160 rush attempts, 700 to 750 on the ground, and call it 4 or 5 touchdowns, both receiving and running the ball? Like that would put him easily into RB3 territory.
Like I said, I don't think that wouldn't surprise me in the least bit that he puts up a stat line like that. But then it also wouldn't surprise me that if they do get Dalvin Cook, that Raheem Mostert's on the chopping block, right? Like that, both of those scenarios to me are equally as likely to happen. Like it's just, yes, I think Raheem Mostert is a solid running back. And if he plays a full season, then sure, RB3 I think could be there, but there's a lot of question marks that I have about it because I think I think he could easily be a cut player before the season starts. Like it's one of those things.
Okay. Fair enough. Let's hit up the next running back here. Jeff Wilson Jr., RB29 last year. 176 on the rush attempts, 860 yards, 5 touchdowns, 22 receptions, 37 targets, 185 yards, and 1 touchdown. Thoughts on Jeff Wilson?
Eerily similar to Raheem Mostert, right? As we said, I think Jeff Wilson Jr. probably takes a little bit more of a haircut to Devon Achane, which is why I have him third on the backfield list, right? But regardless of, he is quick, right? He might be the best pass protection running back they have, so that might save his roster spot. So I expect there to be kind of a balanced rotation. I think they're going to keep with that. Mike McDaniels likes that. It's kind of what they came from. They don't have a true quote-unquote better option, if you will. These guys are very similar. But I do think that Mostert will, like I said, Mostert will get first crack at it. And then with Achane stepping in there, I think it's Jeff Wilson who will kind of fall behind just a little bit. So I think you're looking at potentially bottom end of RB3 at the best, but I think realistically you're looking at like an RB4. He is a depth play. If they don't bring in Dalvin Cook, that if there's an injury to happen, that's where you insert Jeff Wilson and really kind of get some good value out of it. But I think he's the one with the most risk of losing opportunity because of Devon Achane coming into the backfield.
Yeah, and I think there's familiarity there, right? Like he was in San Francisco and Mike McDaniel was in San Francisco. They traded for him halfway through the year last year. Like there's a reason why Jeff Wilson is playing for the Dolphins, and it all has to be with he knows the guy in charge, right? So I do think that gives him a leg up. I think him being there is a way to be kind of that conduit from coach to player in that room. I mean, that's what all the signs point towards, right? So, his position is secure. And I think that, his productivity, while I think, last year, obviously it was good, 5 touchdowns. I don't know that he, sees those numbers again in terms of productivity. Kevin, I like what you're saying, guy who can pass pro, guy who can protect Tua because they need to protect Tua. But unfortunately, if you're in pass pro, that means you're not getting your number called to get the ball handed off to you or, getting the ball dumped off to you. So I do think that his stat line takes a bit of a hit. And again, oddly enough, he's only going, I guess it's 16 picks, so that's a round and a half after Raheem Mostert, from what I'm seeing. So, again, it's, if you pick one, odds are you probably aren't going to need to pick another. And I think similarly, and I don't want to steal Derek's thunder on this one, but similar to what you said with Raheem Mostert, like if this dude's your fifth running back, then okay, you can put him in case of emergency.
No, and some really, really good points made there, to the point where I don't know that I have much extra to add to that. But I do think that there is some value here, just from the standpoint of if this backfield goes into the season like it is right now, right? You got Mostert, you got Wilson, you got Devon Achane there. I really do think that you're probably going to see this thing split up with about a three-way pie on this thing from a rush attempts, right? Not going to surprise me to see Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert probably both get to somewhere around 160 to 180 rush attempts when it's all said and done. And you see Devon Achane probably closer to, in that 70 to 100 mark, right? Like, I could easily see that one come into play there. And I think Devon Achane probably plays more out of the backfield as a receiving back. Like, that's very much where a lot of the reports I kind of see coming out of the Dolphins camp have him playing at there. So I think he has a role in the PPR side of things. And it's not going to surprise me that when we look up at the end of the season, all of these guys are kind of peppered right in that same kind of ranking when the season's all said and done. Obviously, should the backfield hold the way it is, but not going to surprise me that you see Wilson in RB3 territory. You see Wilson in kind of that back end RB3, top end RB4, and Achane as a top 50 back. Like, it's not going to surprise me when we look up and we see all of these guys probably within 12 to 15 rankings of each other when the season's all said and done. So I think each one of these guys produces some value and can do some things, but they are nothing more than a depth piece. And if you're having to rely on them to, really be a guy that you're going to use during your season probably more than 2 or 3 times on certain weeks, like you're going to be in trouble. That roster was not well constructed at that point. Any other thoughts on this one?
I'll get into it with the third guy.
All right. Third guy. Here we go. Devon Achane, the rookie, drafted in the 3rd round, pick 84 out of Texas A&M. Thoughts on Devon Achane?
Achane comes in probably with the most dynamic skill set, just because of how he was used at Texas A&M. Again, another fast guy, right? He is fast. They are trying to get up on linebackers quickly and force them to make decisions. I think he's the best receiver of the football out of this. So I think what might separate him is he might have fewer carries, but I think he might make up for it in a couple more grabs. Really what's going to kind of come down between the three of these guys is how their touchdowns split out. But then again, like Derek phrased, if you tell me that all 5 of these guys have if all 3 of these guys have 5 touchdowns at the end of the season, is anybody going to be surprised? Like, however they get them, but they each fall into the end zone 5 times. So Achane's ability to kind of cement himself in the rotation and stay on the field is going to be how well he picks up pass protection. So rookies generally struggle with that a little bit. I don't think the Achane is going to be necessarily any different. He wasn't pass pro a whole heck of a lot at Texas A&M, so it is going to be something a bit new for him. But he does do well in a kind of that zone running scheme that Miami is going to implement. He can be a threat in play action pass with his ability to get out of the backfield quickly. And he also is going to be able to be, most likely he's going to be the running back gadgetry guy with his youth. Typically, they don't have older running backs do kind of some of the weird wrinkles in an offense, but they do have the younger players do that just because it's something different that people have to look at. So I like Devon Achane. I like his future prospects. So in Dynasty, I like him a little bit more than in redraft, just because with Wilson and with Mostert both getting a little bit longer in the tooth, youth springs eternal, especially in Dynasty football. So that's where Achane has some more value. But overall, I like the player, but I think if you have 3 running backs, it's really tough for fantasy, right? It works well for the Dolphins scheme and what they want to do. It's going to be really tough for fantasy football. So in redraft formats, I'm probably staying away from this, guys, like just all the way around. Like, yes, I think Mostert might finish the top of the ladder, but I would be remiss to say that I wouldn't want to pivot somewhere else with a guy who's guaranteed more consistent volume in a redraft league where I'm not worried about sticking him in as a flex on a week and only getting 5 or 6 points out of that, because that could be extremely frustrating if you're counting on 11 or 12 and you only get half that. Half point PPR, that could be the difference in a week.
Yeah, that's the point that I did want to make is like I'm not sure I want a piece of this Miami backfield. There are pieces of this Miami team that I want. I'm just not sure that the running back room is one of them. Oddly enough, from what I'm seeing, Achane's going the highest he's going first out of all these guys. If that's not the shiny new toy, shiny new toy effect, I'm not sure what is. But I think, Derek, to your point that you were making about Wilson and Mostert, you were saying that they would get 100. You think they get like 150 runs a piece, 150 rushes a piece? That's going to be a dramatic change from. I mean, that then, if you go off of last year's numbers, that then only leaves, probably 75 or 80 carries for Achane. And so that's where I think, like, I see the struggle in that, in seeing that any of those guys can get into RB3 territory. Now, granted, they did pass the ball a heck of a lot more last year because they had to, because they were trailing. And also, it's kind of a cheat code to get Tyreek Hill, to throw a bubble screen to Tyreek Hill that goes down as a pass. But I have a hard time believing that any of these, I think it's just like that they will all cannibalize each other, and one won't be able to actually emerge as I think you have 3 RB4s, right? Like, I think there's all 3 of these guys could easily finish RB4, and still, like, collectively that it would be good enough for RB1. But it's just, I think that they're going to be so spread out with the amount of touches and carries. I mean, it could take Achane a little bit of time, but I mean, he was the Texas A&M offense last year. That's it. It was Devon Achane. And when Achane wasn't in, A&M didn't have an offense. So I like the guy too in Dynasty for sure, but I'm not sure that for redraft. I don't think I take any of these Dolphins running backs.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to draft these guys for redraft, it's going to be as a spot start, depth piece. They're going to be on there as your 5th or 6th running back. Devon Achane, where he's coming off the board, you're right, he's kind of coming off in the board in like the 10th round. That makes that a little rich. There's a lot of other guys in that kind of space that I would rather go with and rather put on my roster there than my 5th RB type of thing, right? Like I'm probably looking at getting my first tight end. I'm still probably looking at adding maybe there's better wide receivers typically in that range there that I'd rather go with. Like there's other options for roster construction that I would rather go with than Devon Achane. Part of the reason that you see so much of this kind of fluctuation in his draft capital right now, there's been a lot of reports out there that Mike McDaniel hyping the guy up, coming off of rookie mini camps and some of the stuff the Dolphins have going on down there. But keep in mind, right, we talk extensively about kind of the rookie wall when that comes through, right? Like taking the beating, taking the pounding. The game is, bigger, faster, stronger at this level. Devon Achane's not a big back. He's a 5'9", 180 pound type of back. Fits far more the scat back, special teams type of role. Change of pace type of back than a featured type of back out there. So anybody looking to try and draft him as the featured back out of Miami, I would tell you to be cautious of that. As far as, kind of Miami's run mix, right? Like Alex, you brought that up with 390 rush attempts last year. And it's not going to surprise me if we see the Dolphins try and run the ball a little bit more. Try and keep defenses, guessing a little bit instead of necessarily trying to pin the ears back and trying to get after Tua, like we saw happen so much last year. So not going to surprise me if we see the Dolphins maybe tick up closer to about 450 rush attempts there, in which case there's plenty to go around when you're talking about a three-headed back there. And I think that's probably about what we see. So that's kind of what I'm looking at there. Any other thoughts on the Miami Dolphins running back room?
Buyer beware. It's just a minefield, right? It's not that any of these guys are terrible. They're all solid backs. Achane's unproven, but buyer beware. It's so crowded and it looks so evenly matched that unless you have keeper or dynasty implications for Achane, it's going to be a tough road to hoe between the three of them this year.
Fair enough. Real quick question coming in here. Actually, I guess that wasn't really a question. My apologies there. Terry's thinking that Dalvin will be a Dolphin, and Jamie saying that Achane put on a little bit of weight and is all the way up to 193. 5'9", 193 back, like that still puts him in that scat back, smaller back type of thing, right? Like where you see these guys
like 208 plus,
right?
It's kind of that honey hole for running backs, 208 to 215. I mean, it's kind of a weird range, right? But if they hit 220, yeah, they hit 220, and then we think, well, they're just a power back.
They're a fullback.
But for under 200, they're like, it's crazy what 20 pounds of muscle will do for these players and how they can absorb NFL punishment. But, and he may not be wrong about the Dalvin Cook thing either. Like, a lot of signs are pointing towards him going down to South Beach. But for sake of the information that we know at the time of putting this show on, Cook's not a Dolphin. So this is how we see the players.
Absolutely. All right, let's head to the wide receiver room. Tyreek Hill finished wide receiver 3 last year. 119 receptions, 170 targets, 1,710 yards, 7 touchdowns, an average of 10 targets per game. Thoughts on Tyreek Hill?
So I wouldn't be surprised to see if his targets go down, but his receptions kind of creep up just a little bit, right? And he just becomes a little bit more efficient. A lot of these errant targets weren't necessarily Tua driven, right? Like his stat line with Skylar Thompson was not necessarily what we all wanted it to be, although Thompson did try and force feed him quite a bit. So I like Tyreek. I understand drafting him as your wide receiver 1. Again, at this time, there are no legal implications, so we are rating the player based off of what we absolutely know. And what we absolutely know is he's healthy, he's going to be available for the offense, and Tua loves peppering him with the football. That being said, 160, 162 targets, I think is about right, but I do think you might be able to see him to get up to like 100 and, maybe 122, 123 receptions, right? So you kind of trade that out, slightly more efficient, but he's definitely a top 5 wide receiver. I understand the top 3 potential just because of big play and how this offense is formatting. So, as long as he's going to play or seemingly going to play all 17 games, and there's not games that we know he will be missing due to suspension, in redraft leagues, he is a first-round pick in single quarterback formats, and he is a second-round pick in superflex formats. So, if you want him, you have to go get him, but the explosiveness is there. He had a career year last year with targets and receptions, which is great for him and great for this Dolphins offense, and I think you can expect more of the same this year.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to that. He's a first-round draft pick, right? Like, he's one of those guys that if you're trying to go a zero RB approach, this is a guy that you can, he's a good foundation in that first round, right? Like, I know that, Jefferson and Chase, like, it's those 3. Maybe you can throw Cooper Kupp in there, but that might cool a little bit since he's coming back from an injury. But like realistically, if you're on the clock and Tyreek Hill is available and those other two guys are gone, then smash draft, move on. Like it's very simple. Don't overthink it. Don't overthink it.
Yeah, that might be the most sage advice there. Smash draft and move on. I think you're 100% right there. And Kevin, kind of to just finish bringing that point home that you were talking about, that they peppered him with targets. They absolutely did. Out of that 170, though, only about 127 were deemed catchable. So yeah, if he can definitely get still keep that 160 and improve some of those quality targets, I think you're spot on there. Where we're going to see him, creep up with some more receptions on that, more receptions, bigger chance of more yards. His touchdown rate seemed a little bit low last year, so it wouldn't surprise me to see us, have that creep up even a little bit higher there. Overall, just smash draft and move on. All right, Jaylen Waddle was wide receiver 7 last year, 75 receptions, 117 targets, 1,356 yards, 8 touchdowns, 6.9 targets per game. Thoughts on Jaylen Waddle?
So I think Waddle's a guy you could see get upwards of 90 receptions this year. Like, I do think Waddle's going to be more involved, maybe a little bit more consistent for this offense. And he's a guy that we all like to watch, right? He's fun to watch. He's fun to root for. And right, wrong, or indifferent, he's the guy who's not facing legal troubles. Like, I know I've been saying that, hey, we're not going to draft any differently because of what we don't know. But what we do know is at the time of recording, there's a 100% chance Jaylen Waddle has the potential to play all 17 games. So, and you can mix it up a little bit due to the fact of you get a little bit of a discount, right? It's only a round, but you do get a slight discount for a player who has the potential of putting up, top 5 numbers himself in this offense. And I think all of that helps as far as value goes. So I like Jaylen Waddle a lot. He is a guy that I am targeting when I can, but I have not had much luck, drafting him just due to where my draft position is.
So here's an interesting thought experiment. You're drafting a team. You're going 0 RB approach. You take Tyreek Hill in the first round. Do you then follow it up and grab Jaylen Waddle too and just see what happens? Because both of these guys potentially could be a wide receiver 1. We saw it last year, right? They both finished wide receiver 1 territory. If you're willing to go 0 RB and you're hoping to get 2 guys that can finish wide receiver 1, if that's the path you're going, screw it that so what that they play for the same team.
So I like that strategy in best ball.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because you can stack both, and you can stack Tua with him too, right? Like, I mean, if you really wanted to kind of create stacks, and this will be something that I think would be a good topic for us to get into, as far as drafting, especially for best ball and how that looks, to kind of create those stacks or mini stacks, if you will. I like that concept because it instantly makes you different from everyone else that you're going to face. For redraft, in theory, it should work, right? Due to that. In application, typically where you're getting Tyreek and then where Waddle's coming back around, like it's like a round plus a few, right? So it's almost it's just a touch of a reach.
You'd be reaching on Waddle, yeah.
Yeah. So if you're a diehard Dolphins fan and that's what you want to do, more power to you. You could do far worse than starting out your draft with Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle. So I'm not going to say it's doom and gloom. But typically at the top of my draft, I do prefer a little bit more diversity, especially if I'm going 0 RB, because I want to do my best to make sure that strategy holds up. So instead of a Jaylen Waddle, maybe I'm looking at a Tyreek Hill, and depending on how that draft falls back around here, you could do like a Tyreek Hill and damn near like a CeeDee Lamb or an AJ Brown or
Garrett Wilson, something like that.
Yeah, or Garrett Wilson, right? And go with another team's number one receiver. But like I said, you could do that. It would not be the worst thing in the world. I personally don't think I'd implement that. But I think the question's a very good question. I think some people are going to be faced with this dilemma. And the answer is you're welcome to do that. Like, there's nothing saying that that will screw up your draft. But I think I would shy away.
Yeah, I when you were asking the question, I was doing this about as hard as my little neck would move my head. No, I wouldn't. That's not a strategy I would implement, simply from the standpoint that if you have these guys have big blow up weeks, you're like awesome. You're going to have a great week. But the problem is that they tend to kind of go cyclical a little bit, right? Like if one of them has a big blow up week, the other one likely isn't. So there's a chance that you're going to sit there and you're going to see, somebody get wide receiver 5 on the week and somebody else be wide receiver 50 on the week. And so what you just got on a return on that one, you kind of nullified out there. And the ball can, on any given play, right? The ball can only be thrown to one player at a time, right? So you're kind of limiting that down there. Neither of these guys necessarily set the world on fire from touchdown, touchdowns to it. It wasn't like either one of these guys was a double-digit touchdown fiend. So there's a lot of those types of things that are going to play into that as well. That I think if you try and go the Tyreek and the Jaylen Waddle there, you're going to be in for a bad time, right? Like even if you go back to what we were thinking on, a few weeks ago when we covered the Raiders, right? And you were talking Devontae Adams, Josh Jacobs, you could get them round 1, round 2 type of thing there. And we said that's probably a shy away from. Like I would view stacking Tyreek and Jaylen Waddle very much in the same light if you were going to stack Devontae and Josh Jacobs type of deal. I'm going to stay away from that one as well. I'd rather pivot and get a guy that's, like Kevin said, the one on their prospective roster there, more opportunity to be the go-to guy in that offense. And that's kind of just how I would roll. But Jaylen Waddle, terrific value for where you can pick him up in the draft, and absolutely a guy that you could certainly start off, just a tremendous type of, zero RB type of strategy. Cause you could go with, even a Travis Kelce, you could go that tight end, get that elite difference maker at that position, and still followed up with Jaylen Waddle in the second round. And you've got that's a pretty potent 1-2 punch starting your draft off there. So any other thoughts on Waddle here? Alrighty. Cedrick Wilson, wide receiver 57 last year. I don't know that that's right, but 12 receptions, 18 targets, 136 yards, 0 touchdowns. Thoughts on Cedrick Wilson?
Pass. This is a 2 wide receiver offense. I really want nothing to do with this.
Yeah, and realistically, in terms of pass catchers, we've talked about 2 of them. There might be a third one, but it's not coming from the wide receiver room.
Yeah, this is a hard pass for me as well. Alrighty, let's head on into Durham Smythe, who was tight end 38 last year, 15 receptions, 20 targets, 129 yards, 1 touchdown, average of 1.5 targets per game. Thoughts on Durham Smythe?
Another pass. I'm going to look for other options, and this is not tight end room is again Travis Kelce or bust. It's touchdown dependent. The Dolphins traditionally do not throw to the tight end a whole heck of a lot, as we saw with Mike Gesicki. So I will be looking at other options besides Durham Smythe.
Yeah. See, Terry, I'm with you. I think there is sneaky value here. And the thing is, he's not being drafted right now. So you could wait, right? Durham Smythe, you could wait on him. You could pick him up in the last pick of the draft. Probably is a streaming option, but I do like the fact that there is, at least something there in terms of he will be the guy as a tight end. You're right, Kevin. Very touchdown dependent. It's not exactly going to be a slam dunk week in and week out. There's going to be some stinkers, but that's kind of the nature of the tight end position outside of maybe Travis Kelce and George Kittle when he's healthy, right? So I think that I think there is some sneaky value here. I think with Gesicki gone, I do like him a little bit more. And with you don't even really have to, spend a draft pick on him. So he is somebody that I will, just have if I decide to wait on tight end. He's a guy that I'll make sure I have on my roster when the draft is completed, but I'm not going to spend, any sort of single digit capital on him. Probably not even anything in a round that starts with the 1 on him either.
Yeah, I'm in the pass category. No, thank you. Move along. The Dolphins have one of the harder schedules for tight ends against opposing defenses this season. So you couple that with the fact that Gesicki, who rates off the charts in athleticism, yada yada yada, was a guy that a lot of people kind of had picked and poised to have a really good season last year, and fell flat and barely snuck into tight end 2. And Durham Smythe couldn't get his way onto the roster chart above Gesicki. Like, no, I'm just gonna say no, thank you, and move along. At the only kind of fantasy value I see there is bye week fill in, waiver wire pickup if the matchup is super juicy, right? If he's playing that team that every tight end that goes up against him has a great week, sure, I'll add him on my roster for that week, maybe start him, and away we go. So, but no, I'm not looking to add Durham Smythe to any roster. All right, Tua Tagovailoa, QB 15 last year, 259 completions, 400 attempts, 64.8 completion percentage, 3,548 yards, 25 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 24 rush attempts, 70 yards, 0 tutties. Thoughts on Tua?
I think Tua is a sneaky QB1 option. With missed time. And this is where the variable comes in, right? Like if you're in a super flex league, Tua is a great number 2. Like you might have to grab that second quarterback a little bit sooner than what you'd want in some cases. But Tua is a great number 2 option because they are going to pass the ball a fair amount down there. If he stays healthy, I think he's going to be pushing for 4,000 yards. I don't know if he's going to quite get there, but I think he's going to be pushing for it. And the way that this offense sets up, he has home run players all the way around him, right? So you get some big weeks because of all the bonus points that come along with yardages and everything else. If your league's set up that way, I hope he can stay healthy. I want him to stay healthy, right? Like, God knows we cannot deal with another season. Just the NFL, like this isn't even fantasy league. The NFL can't deal with another season of how poorly managed the Tua situations were, with him getting knocked down and him just being maybe he's just more susceptible to concussions, right? Like maybe that's just how his makeup is, because some of those hits didn't necessarily look like brutal, but they were clearly enough to ring his bell and cause disorientation, discomfort, and visible signs of being concussed. So I hope he's fully healthy. I hope he doesn't have any reoccurring situations or lingering side effects that might creep up throughout the season. But the Dolphins have to be a little bit worried about this. And I think that's why they brought Mike White in to help with this and have a little bit better, a little bit more experience, maybe a little bit more command of the offense in Mike White as opposed to Skylar Thompson. But all things created equal, with Tua being healthy, I think he has sneaky QB1 potential. And if nothing else, I think QB 15 might be about his floor. Like, I think that's a pretty safe range for him based off of how efficient he can be and how this offense is going to flow through him.
Yeah, I mean, he missed 4 games. He missed a month last year. And you're right, Kevin, the optics on all of it was just bad. It was bad. We could all see it. Everybody could see it. That was the issue, is that everybody could see it. And with how many cameras are at every NFL game right now, like, we're not going to miss it. With all of the people that talk about NFL games Monday through Saturday, we're not going to miss it. Like, it's something that you can't hide, especially when there's video proof. So you're right. Him being QB 15, missing 4 games, like you could very easily see him, creep up into that QB1 territory. And so right now, with where he's going, is kind of in that QB1 territory right there at the back end of it. I think he finishes right in where he's going at QB 11, QB 10, 12 in that range. So I don't think that there's any like necessary, that you get good value from where you pick him. I do like him as a second quarterback in a 2 QB league because there is that potential to go crazy and the potential for him to get basically, those bonus points, the free yardage by doing a little 2-yard out to Tyreek and let Tyreek do the rest, and you get those passing yards points. So I think that is, there's added bonus value into what you can get out of him. Maybe not on a week-to-week basis, but certainly there will be weeks that he will shine because of that. As far as like a single quarterback, I don't know. Because I think that there's going to be extra caution. Like they're going to treat him like a porcelain doll and be just super cautious. And if he takes one hit week 2, who knows if we see him again, right? Like there's all these eventualities, which you can say with anybody, any quarterback or player in this league. But I do think that there's going to be more caution taken with Tua this year than maybe any other quarterback in terms of their injury history, especially with the head injuries. So I think there is some caution that needs to be taken on our end as fantasy football players when it comes to Tua Tagovailoa. But I mean, he's a QB1 if he plays the whole year. Will he play the whole year? That's the gamble you take.
Yeah. And I think you're pretty spot on there. It's one of those that QB1 leagues are single QB leagues. I'm going to be looking elsewhere. Super flexes, wouldn't mind drafting him as my second QB. I don't know that I quite want to spend the draft capital to pull him off the board at QB 11, but he'll certainly be in kind of that either second or third run on the QBs there. And so just depending upon how that plays out and where the draft is going at that point, may pull the trigger there and go for it. But I think he does. He has some sneaky upside to get into QB1. But I think the floor is pretty safe there too as a high end QB2. So I'm down to put Tua on the roster as the super flex QB. Any other thoughts on the Dolphins or Tua?
Is this playoff team this year?
I think they could be. I think they're also playing in a division that's really tough, right? Yeah, that's a really, really tough division.
Yeah, between the division, just the AFC in general, right? I mean, we expect the NFC North to be a dogfight. We expect the AFC East to be a dogfight. I think there's one team coming out of the AFC South, and
the AFC West could have two or three.
It could be a 2-team race at the end, like depending on which 2 teams you believe in or which team outside the Chiefs you believe in. So there's a lot of playoff-worthy talent on paper. The AFC is just stacked. So they're gonna have a fight. I don't know that they win this division, but if Tyreek doesn't have legal issues and Tua stays healthy, I think that their chances are much, much better than if either or both occur for this team. Because they're not going to be able to drop games early in the season and make it up, right? Like They're going to have to come out. You need to absolutely win the games that you should win, and you probably need to go 50-50 on the games that are either a toss-up or maybe that you shouldn't for them to be playoff viable.
The crazy thing is they get New England out of the way before their bye week, right? They get both their New England games out of the way before their bye week. The Jets, who knows what to make of them. And then obviously Buffalo is Buffalo. It's tough. It's going to be tough.
Yeah, absolutely. Alrighty, let's move on into the Jacksonville Jaguars, who were also 8-9 last year. 57% pass, 43% run. They ranked 10th in points for, 9th in yards for. Doug Peterson, the coach. Preston Taylor, the offensive coordinator. We're going to head right into the running back room here. Travis Etienne, who was RB17 last year, 220 rush attempts, 1,125 yards, 5 touchdowns, 35 receptions, 45 targets, 316 yards, 0 touchdowns. Thoughts on Travis Etienne?
So Etienne's not fighting with James Robinson at the beginning of the season like he was last year. We kind of got that full year out of his system after recovering with kind of a fluky injury his rookie season and missing the entire campaign. And the Jags looked good down the stretch, right? They had a historic playoff comeback against the Chargers. They played the Chiefs, I think, a little bit harder and tougher than most people wanted to believe leading up to that game before they got bounced out. It's very possible that Travis Etienne continues to improve and really kind of cements himself as a high-end RB2. I do not see him getting into RB1 status, but I think instead of 17, I think you could be looking at 13, 14, 15. So yes, improvement, but I just don't think he's going to see enough sheer volume because of his size and his skill set to get up into that RB1 territory unless he's going to catch 85 or 90 balls, and I just don't see Trevor Lawrence checking it down that much.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that ETN is high-end RB2. It will take a miracle for him to crack RB1 territory. And truth be told, that's kind of where he's going right now, is in that high-end RB2, 14th or 15th off the board. So in terms of value, that there isn't much in the way of value. It is, where you're getting him is what I expect you to get out of him.
Yeah, I don't know that, miracle would be the word that I'd use to describe him getting up into RB1 territory. All that would take is him remaining healthy and some other guys getting injured along the way to kind of move him up a couple of spots. And you look at it, right? The Ramondre Stevenson ranked ahead of him, right? There's a lot of things that could be going on in New England still, right? We've already seen the debacle with New England running backs over the last few years, right? Breece Hall coming off a big injury there. So there's a lot of things that could play out there that we could see Travis Etienne get up in there. The real question that I'm going to have to figure out there is, do I have him as the keeper? Do I release him back to the draft pool to see how that one goes? There's a lot of things that could be there. But when we're talking actual fantasy here, Travis Etienne is a guy that showed a lot of pop, a lot of bursts throughout the season last year, really showed that he started to acclimate to it, especially once he got kind of the lead role there without James Robinson in there, because for whatever reason to start off the season, they just seemed to kind of pound James Robinson, call James Robinson's number and really let him pound and absorb a lot of the workload to the beginning part of the season. Once James Robinson was traded, Travis Etienne kind of took off there and had a just terrific run there through part of the season, and then even faded just a little bit down the stretch there, which, kind of the normal thing that we see there, where we'll typically see guys put together a run of just really good games and then a couple of off games, and that was very much what we saw there. So I think that that's probably pretty close to what we'll see here again out of Travis Etienne. This is one of those that he tended to break a lot of big runs throughout the season. So he's got that, just that breakaway speed. And if he can get the blocks in front of him to make some things happen, that can be really good. But I don't know that we're going to see necessarily the volume or the pass catching work to really propel him into that upper echelon or the mid rounds or mid options as far as RB1s are going there. So I think you're drafting him at what he's going to finish. So it's not really, not really value for you in your draft, but it is one of those that if you want him on your team, you're going to have to draft him about where he's going to finish there. So, kind of a push kind of draft pick there for me. Tank Bigsby, coming over through the draft. He was drafted in the 3rd round, pick 88 out of Auburn. Thoughts on Tank Bigsby?
I will be more than happy to be wrong on this one, but I'm not going anywhere near Tank Bigsby. Like, I saw him play a ton in the SEC, and the dude just always seemed to shrink in the biggest games that Auburn had, whether it was against Georgia every single year while he was there, Alabama every single year he was there, or even LSU. So I don't think he has what it takes to be a sustainable answer at running back in the NFL. So if I'm grabbing Travis Etienne, I'm not worried about a handcuff. And if I don't grab Travis Etienne, I'm surely not going after Tank Bigsby. So he is a big fat pass for me. I feel like he doesn't play within himself well enough. He tries to do too much and tries to make plays where there's not, which creates fumble issues, and he ends up going sideways instead of north and south. And so plays where maybe he's only going to be able to get 3 yards, he ends up, at, basically 0 gain, maybe a yard if he falls forward, as opposed to hitting that gap, getting forward for that 3 yards or so, and then living to fight another down. He doesn't receive the ball overly well out of the backfield either. So there's too much about the guy that I don't care for. So for my money, it is going somewhere else and not on Tank Bigsby.
Derek, I'll let you give your opinion here, because I'm not going to add much more in the way of that, but I do have a question for you guys when we're done.
Fair enough. I'm kind of right there with you, Kevin. I don't necessarily really want any part of Tank Bigsby. He had a lot of usage at Auburn there, but never really had the big play. You never really saw him kind of jump out there. The combine measurables were all kind of in the okay type of range there. So this is one of those that this is a guy competing for number 2 and is was brought in more as a case of Doug Peterson likes to have a lot of running backs on the roster. And I think that's what we're seeing here. So I'm not looking to add him for redraft, especially where he's kind of coming off the board in the 140 range. Like if he's there, and we see him start to be used on a waiver wire, maybe I might take a shot at him through it, but I got to wait and see what this thing looks like more so.
So there are 3 running backs that are kind of going right around in that same area. I will give you those 3 names, and I'd like you to rank them, one of which, now 2 of which we've talked about. In no particular order: Tank Bigsby, Jeff Wilson, Kenneth Gainwell.
Receiver?
No, that's fair.
Like, I'm just not going to – I don't know that I want to reach for any of that. Like, I just don't know that any of that strikes a chord where I'm going to go, oh, yeah, that's it. Like, I could go receiver. I could go, if it's a super flex, I could be looking at a 3rd quarterback possibly. Like, I think I'd rather have Ryan Tannehill. Like, as in jeopardy as Ryan Tannehill is this season with Will Levis sitting behind him, I think I'd rather take Ryan Tannehill. Like, I think I would rather look at, 3rd options on some of these teams who are going to be a little bit more pass heavy, like KJ Osborne. Like, I think I'd rather see that. I think I'd rather look at a Donovan Peoples-Jones. I think I would.
Nico Collins.
There you go. Like, I just feel like there's other options. So those guys, none of them do that for me. In the premise of your question, I would go Jeff Wilson, and then I would go Kenneth Gainwell, and then I would go Tank Bigsby. Barf.
Copy and paste. Like, that's Control-C, Control-V. That's where I'm going with that list there. Some more names in there. I'd pivot and take Tyler Higbee. Like, I'd go and get my late round tight end at that point. Like, no thanks. So, any other thoughts there? Alrighty, Let's hit up the wide receiver room. Christian Kirk finished wide receiver 11 last year, 84 receptions, 133 targets, 1,108 yards, 8 touchdowns, 7.8 targets per game. Thoughts on Christian Kirk?
I'm not going to say this was a sneaky wide receiver 11, but it was a sneaky wide receiver 11, right? Like, I don't know that I would have been able to tell you that if you would have asked me that question without the graphics and say, hey, where do you think Christian Kirk finished last year? I think I would have told you 15, 16, 17. Like, I knew he had a productive season there. I knew he was highly involved in this offense. The wide receiver 11 just I feel like that's his absolute ceiling. We're still going to get into another reason that I think that with a new addition to the wide receiver room, but I think we're going to see some regression here for Christian Kirk. I think he's more or less going to finish. I think he could finish in the top 20, but I think that might even be a little bit of a stretch here based off of how this offense is going to run with Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence and Christian Kirk and company there. So I see a regression coming. Therefore, I'm going to be very particular if I'm looking at Christian Kirk where I am drafting him. And realistically, there's a lot of chances I'm not, because I would like Kirk as my wide receiver 3. Potential flex play. Like, I think I would be comfortable with that there. But as you're looking at the draft board and kind of seeing how this breaks down, I just don't see myself pulling that trigger for Christian Kirk. That being said, he's going to play in the slot again a lot this year, which I think helps, right? Because he's not necessarily going to be fighting with other players for targets. Some of those, the slot, shorter routes, easier concepts, quick release, get the ball out of Trevor Lawrence's hands, all the things that you do to continue to help and develop a young quarterback. But I think Lawrence is almost past that point. Like, this might be the year where you kind of see him evolve into more of a down the field thrower of the football. So I believe that comes at Christian Kirk's detriment. Now, they paid him a lot of money, so they're going to feature him in a lot of different ways, but I don't see him finishing in wide receiver 1 territory this year.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And realistically, with Christian Kirk, that wide receiver 11 feels a little deceiving, right? Because there were some weeks where he was fantastic. A couple weeks, I look at the game against Kansas City in the regular season. They lost, but he had nine catches on 12 targets for 105 yards and 2 touchdowns. But then there were other weeks where he a win over the Jets in December, 3 catches on 6 targets for 22 yards and no touchdowns. And so, obviously those are 2 extremes. And with receivers anyways, you're going to kind of ride a roller coaster. But, man, it just feels like this roller coaster is very, very dips and valleys So as a best ball candidate, sure, no problem with Christian Kirk. Season long, I do think that you better have some better options or some more consistent options at receiver, because I think there are weeks that he will throw up some duds. And truth be told, I think ideally Trevor Lawrence, in a perfect world for him, he's only asked to get 250 yards in a game, because they will be running the ball effectively and doing other things. So I'm not sure that the bonus yardage points are in there. The touchdowns that he had last year came in chunks. The 8 touchdowns, he had half of those before we were really into October, the middle of October. He had 4 touchdowns, and so 4 to spread out from the rest of the 10 games. It just feels like with Christian Kirk, you're going to be, riding some waves. And I feel like more often than not, they're not very fun waves to be riding. So I would agree with you, Kevin. I don't know that he's the pass catcher that I really want down there in Jacksonville.
I mean, I get what you're saying, but I don't think that it was as inconsistent last year as what you're kind of painting there, right? Like 17 games throughout the season, 5 of those games was spent as a wide receiver 1. 4 more of those games was sent as a wide receiver 2. He had several games spent as a wide receiver 3. So the majority of the season, he was giving you finishes that were very usable for your fantasy, and especially where he was coming off the board last year. Like, you struck fantasy gold on that because he was coming off the board and you were able to easily put him on as your 3rd or 4th wide receiver, and he performed up as a wide receiver 1 for you. So absolutely was a kind of a steal in last year's draft. This year, I think that's a little bit harder to say that because of the fact that he's coming off the board in the 50s and coming off the board as like the 25th, 26th type of wide receiver. Like, I think that's probably closer to where we see him finish this year, is in that back end of wide receiver 2, top end of wide receiver 3. I think that's really the range we're looking at here. So call it somewhere between wide receiver 22 and wide receiver 27, I think is probably where I kind of see him finishing this season at. So you're kind of just draft him as kind of one of those push draft capital type of moves there again. And this is an offense that I think we're going to see a lot of changes happen to as well, right? It was when the ball was thrown last year, it primarily went to Christian Kirk or Evan Engram. There's another wide receiver in the mix that they made a move for. They brought him in, and a guy that I think will end up moving Christian Kirk into the slot there. So I think that he'll see some good targets there. But it's not going to be the same kind of average depth of target where you saw him average 13 yards per reception last year. I think we probably see that drop down a little bit this year, to the point where we're probably looking closer to about a 10 yards per reception there. So that does change things quite a bit.
And I guess, what to finish off my point, and I forgot to make it, was, it's 5th round capital that you're spending on Christian Kirk right now, right? 5th, 6th round capital. And it just feels like a gamble to be taken with your 5th round pick there, to kind of, and I get the point that you're making, Derek, about, where he was and how he was, wide receiver 1 or 2 for half of the games. But those other games, it was tough. It was tough. Like he definitely had some really tough weeks. And so for a 5th round pick, like that just doesn't feel like where I want to be in the 5th round, staring down his name.
Fair enough. Calvin Ridley, fully reinstated, playing for the Jacksonville Jaguars this year. Didn't play last year. Thoughts on Calvin Ridley?
I think Ridley's the guy I actually want.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like he's out for something to prove. Obviously, the hype comes out of Jacksonville, says he looks good, says he looks faster than he's ever been, and he's learned his lesson. I do think he's learned his lesson. I think he has been kind of the poster child for a lot of these rookies coming in of why we don't do this. So, he may not have agreed with the length of the suspension, but coming back, I think he's ready to make amends and kind of get after it. So he provides a different type of element for Trevor Lawrence in this passing game, right? He's going to be able to play outside the numbers. He's going to be able to, continue to do safeties. Not that Christian Kirk can't, but Kirk will be primarily playing out of the slot. So it would not surprise me to see Calvin Ridley was somewhere in the neighborhood of 90 receptions on 135 targets and 6 touchdowns. I think he can have a very, very good year. As we get closer to draft time, I think his stock is only going to continue to rise. So if you're drafting early, I think the value is now. And I think if you're waiting to draft until right before the season starts, your margin for error is going to be drastically reduced. And excuse me, and you might even have to kind of reach on him a little bit if you want a piece of that offense, or if this is a guy that you're looking to get after. But nevertheless, I like Ridley a lot. I think he's going to be able to do some really cool things in Jacksonville, and he's definitely a guy that I'm looking at to help round out part of my main wide receiver core in redraft leagues this year.
Yeah, I would agree. I think this is the guy that I want pass catcher wise from from Jacksonville, which doesn't bode well because I'm in a league with you too, so that kind of sucks. But I do think that he will be the one that we see kind of get what Christian Kirk did last year, right? Like I think that's the kind of flip those roles, and I think Calvin Ridley's a better receiver than Christian Kirk is. So you have a better skill set. That translates to probably an uptick in the stat line. So I like Calvin Ridley. I think that he's the one of the three that we will talk about. He's the one that I really would be targeting, and with where he's going, I think that he can finish a little bit above where you're having to take him. Like I feel like he's going wide receiver 21. That's back end of wide receiver 2. I feel like he will finish comfortably in wide receiver 2, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that we'll see some really good things out of Calvin Ridley to the point, and I think Kevin hit the point on the head that now is the time that you're going to be able to get some draft capital value for this pick. Come the start of the season, I think that'll disappear. And this is the guy, right? Like I just made the point that Christian Kirk was seeing about 13, a little over 13 yards per reception. Calvin Ridley has traditionally been that guy that's 13, 15 type of yards down the field as far as per reception type of thing. So I think that's probably the role that we see him in. We see Zay Jones kind of move out into that gunner role, and we see Christian Kirk in the slot there. So Calvin Ridley, I think, is going to get plenty of targets. He's going to get he's going to get plenty of work there. And, when I'm kind of statting that out, I think that we're going to see him probably in about that 80 to 90 receptions, call it 11 to 1,200 yards. I think that we can probably see him get up into that range with 6-7 touchdowns. So I think we can absolutely see him put up some big numbers there and be that guy that could sneak up into wide receiver 1. But I also feel like this is one of those that you're going to have to be very cautious of where ADP really pushes him when it's onto the draft board there. Because keep in mind, this is also a guy that we haven't seen play football in a year and a half coming into the season, right? So there's a very big difference between running routes in practice and all that and actually doing it in a game. And it may take a little bit of time for him to knock some of the rust off here. Just due to, it's been a year and a half since he played football. We've had a recent example of a guy that missed a year and a half, not due to injury related type of things, and came out looking extremely rusty. So there's different position. I get it. But
yes.
there is some of that going through the games, the flow, it may take a moment to adjust back to. So,
and I'll add that, while it is a different position, Deshaun Watson is who we're talking about, but while it is a different position, he also joined in the second third of that's a dumb way to say it, but the back half of a season, right? Like he joined in the middle of a season and wasn't allowed to be in the facility until, the week before. So Calvin Ridley gets the benefit of having a full off season, right? Gets the benefit of having a training camp, gets the benefit of, basically starting from scratch like every other player does when they show up to a team. So I think there are some parallels in that they both missed some time, but I think the parallels end after that because different position, different set of circumstances in terms of the preparation and lead up into their debut that I think may not lead to as much. I mean, he'll get to play in preseason games, right? Like that's where you knock your rust off. The guy's a pro; he'll knock the rust off in the preseason. So I see the parallel, Derek. I really do. But I think it ends in that they both missed about a year and a half.
Fair enough. Terry saying that Ridley's a perfect centerpiece in a trade. He would draft him with the sole purpose of trading him. Well, and you do you. I kind of want to see what he does. That's what
I would draft him with the sole purpose of watching him put up points on my roster.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going with that. Alrighty, Zay Jones, 82 receptions. Man, I gotta get after the guy that does these graphics.
Your graphics guy, huh?
Yeah, this graphics guy here. I tell you what. All right. Well, we'll find this thing here real quick. Come on, Zay Jones. Let's find. There we go.
It's only a 30-second song.
Yes. All right. So Zay Jones, actually, I'll look like all the stats are actually right. I didn't believe that until I just looked him up. Zay Jones was actually wide receiver 26 last year, 82 receptions, 121 targets, 823 yards, 5 touchdowns, an average of 7.6 targets per game. Thoughts on Zay Jones?
I think there's some potential here for Zay Jones. Now, I think it's wide receiver 3, right? Calvin Ridley in town definitely drops this. So we're going to see some regression out of Zay Jones, but he's going to be able to line up outside opposite him. So some opportunities are going to be there nonetheless. Probably not my first choice as, a number 3 wide receiver that I'm going to be looking to draft for fantasy. But I do think that there's going to be some upside there. I think that him seeing, 3 to 4 targets a game is probably where things are going to land, and then it's just falling into the end zone, which is hard to predict, right? Like, again, I still think that there's probably some other wide receiver options that I would be looking at other than Zay Jones when I'm looking in that. Like, I think I like Dallas's big 3 better, whether you have Gallup or Brandon Cooks further down on your list. I think I like that a little bit more. I think I like what's going on in Seattle with JSN and Lockett and DK a little bit more. So I guess it'd be JSN over Zay Jones. So I'm not opposed to it when you're filling out some depth pieces, but I don't think that he's going to be big splash material, right? So maybe a best ball format to try and capture the one high week where, he'll inevitably have a week where he has 120 yards and, maybe a long touchdown or something like that. But I don't see him coming down with multiple touchdown type games. I don't see him being the predominant deep threat there in Jacksonville. And he is the 3rd option at best, most likely the 4th option after we get done talking about tight ends.
Yeah, I think, we talked about the impact that Calvin Ridley is going to have on Christian Kirk. I think it's more of an impact on Zay Jones here. And I feel like that's going to be an issue. And Kevin, you were talking about, other options that you would rather have. This is kind of in that same area that we were talking about with Tank Bigsby, right? In that one, the 140s area, 150s area in terms of draft. And that's where your Donovan Peoples-Jones are, your Zay Jones, Romeo Dobbs is going there. So like those are other places that I would look. And honestly, I'd probably look at those other 2 receivers more than I would at Zay Jones, just because, it is just, I think that there's a better potential for them to get the ball more than he will.
Yeah, I would smash draft on Romeo Dobbs far more than I would on Zay Jones in that same area there. But Zay Jones for me, best ball candidate. That's about where I'd leave that one, and not looking to add him on any of my redraft rosters. So best ball candidate for me. A couple of comments there. Terry saying that he would only go best ball as well. And Zay Peng's picks. Welcome back there, Peng. Saying that Zay looks better than post ACL Gallup. So, alrighty, let's go ahead and hit up the tight ends here. Evan Engram, tight end 6, 73 receptions, 98 targets, 766 yards, 4 touchdowns, an average of 5.8 targets per game. Thoughts on Evan Engram?
Engram was definitely one of the darlings in the NFL season for tight ends last year. Between him and David Njoku when he was healthy, right? Like, they were great kind of plays off of each other a little bit. And then he went on a tear towards the middle back end of the season to kind of cement himself in that top 6, if you will. So got franchise tagged, so he's on a contract year again. I expect him to be relatively productive again. Like, I think tight end, 6, 7, 8 is well within the realm of possibilities here for Evan Engram. So I like what he was doing in this offense. Doug Peterson does a good job of kind of not necessarily focusing in on, but accentuating the abilities of a tight end. So I like his ability. I like the offense and being able to get the most out of Evan Engram. So he is definitely a guy that I am looking at drafting at tight end if the value's right. All right, that's the big key. But if the value is right, I am taking a peek at Evan Engram because I think he can duplicate what he did last year, maybe with even the possibility of an extra touchdown. If he's given up a couple grabs to Calvin Ridley or anything like that, maybe he falls into the end zone 5 or 6 times instead of 4 to kind of make up for some of that. So overall, I like Evan Engram. He is a tight end that I'm looking at, but I'm not going to reach for him. I'm going to be very diligent about where I'm drafting these tight ends this year because – as we continue to say, it is Travis Kelce or bust as far as early tight end picks, and Evan Engram will have to be at the right value for me to be able to pull the trigger. Otherwise, I will wait a little bit further down the list and take some tight ends that I feel good about also.
Kevin, you brought up the best point of this all is that Doug Peterson's offense really, really allows a tight end to shine, right? We saw it with Zach Ertz in Philadelphia. We just know that a Doug Peterson run offense will give space to the tight end. And I even like we were talking about the impact of a Calvin Ridley, but I think that opens some things up for an Evan Engram, right? That opens it up a little bit so that teams may have to be a nickel a little bit more because they run a 3 wide receiver set. Right, that's going to open up the field a little bit more. You subtract a linebacker and add in a defensive back. I'll take my chances every time. If I'm a quarterback and I see a DB is covering my tight end, I'm going to try to exploit that matchup. Right, usually you're going to have a pretty good size advantage. So I like that idea of Evan Engram as well. I do think you also made the great point of it has to be at the right spot. But I do think that Evan Engram going off now at tight end 8, there's a really big gap between him and Dallas Goedert from what I'm seeing. And I wouldn't be surprised if he finishes in front of Dallas Goedert when it's all said and done, and you're getting him 20 picks later.
Right.
Engram, that is.
Right. Hey, coming off the board, pick 91, right? So you're talking an 8th round type of draft capital there, which that might be pushing it a little bit for me as far as where I'd be wanting to go after my first tight end there. Kevin hit up the point again. It's Travis Kelce or bust. And I've kind of taken that to the point where I'm going to be looking at tight ends is probably going to be rounds 10, 11, 12, somewhere in that range, and really kind of going after the guys going through there. Because again, right, like Evan Engram showed out primarily because of the receptions and because of the yardage there. The touchdowns could come up there a little bit, but again, right, like this is one of those that, now you're talking about a guy that will likely be probably the 3rd option on this roster for it, with 2 guys ahead of him that are going to soak up targets far more. So I do believe in both Christian Kirk and Calvin Ridley. So while it might open some things up for him, the points I think are going to look a little bit different for him this year, where it may be a little bit more touchdown dependent than necessarily in the PPR monster that we kind of saw from him out of that position. So I think that he can perform that, and I think as you're drafting him kind of about at his floor, I think that he'll finish inside tight end 8 for you. But me personally, I'm probably going to be looking at another couple of rounds before I pull the trigger on the old tight end there. Trevor Lawrence was QB 8 last season, 387 completions, 584 attempts, 66.3% completion percentage, 4,113 yards, 25 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 62 rush attempts, 291 yards, and 5 touchdowns on the ground. Thoughts on Trevor Lawrence?
I like it. I think this guy is a quarterback on the rise. I think Trevor Lawrence will finish inside of QB1 territory again. I like his ability to scramble. He doesn't necessarily run, but he does scramble well. He moves well. And I expect his passing efficiencies to continue to improve. So it wouldn't surprise me if we saw him in the neighborhood of 29, 30, 31 touchdowns. I think somewhere in the neighborhood of 4,300 yards. So that'll be up a tick as well. And really being able to kind of take this offense to the next level as the Jags should clearly be the front runner for the AFC South. But now this is going to be a little bit different for this team, right? How do you play front runner as opposed to trying to play the underdog role? So they're going to have probably some more growing pains just because it's a little bit different than what most of this roster has experienced before. But I do believe in Doug Peterson and his teachings for this team. So I like Trevor Lawrence. I like what I saw out of him the tail end of last season. Everything kind of started to click and slow down for him. At least that's how it looked to me. And I think we continue to see that. So I'm expecting a very good year from Trevor Lawrence and kind of that maybe that next step, right, to kind of see where he's really going to fall in, to see if he can push for that that same class of quarterback outside of your top four, right? So you have Mahomes, Allen,
Hurts,
and then does he fit in with Lamar and Herbert and maybe Trevor Lawrence, possibly as you're getting at Justin Fields, right, for fantasy purposes? Like, how does that look, and where's he able to take his next step?
Yeah. Burrow was the name you wanted to throw in there too.
Yeah, sorry, Burrow's four. Yes.
Yep. I think you'd have to be very encouraged. I mean, this was a team that was 4-8 at the start of December last year, right? And then they rattled off 5 wins, got into the playoffs, snuck out a win against the Chargers in that first round. So like they figured something out last year, largely remaining intact in terms of, skill players coming back with the addition of Calvin Ridley. So clearly Trevor Lawrence, like something clicked with them. And so you're encouraged by what you saw. And if that's the Trevor Lawrence that you get over the course of a season, then yeah, you'd have to think that he would be in that conversation of, outside of those top three guys that, and even, he might be able to be knocking on that door sooner rather than later to get into that conversation of those top 3 guys, top 4 guys. So that was very, very encouraging of what he did. I agree with you, Kevin. I think there was a lot of figuring it out. I think that the offense is new, right? He's playing under his 3rd head coach in 3 seasons last year. And so 4th head coach, I guess, technically, because Urban didn't last the whole season. So I think that there is a comfortability that he has. I think that Doug Peterson makes the offense very easy for a young quarterback because of the concepts that he likes to run. So I agree with you. Like Trevor Lawrence, I think is a guy that I'll put on my roster, right? Like I've got Justin Herbert. And if I've got the opportunity in the home league to get a Trevor Lawrence, I'd be ecstatic for the super flex. So I'm not sure that that's how it's going to play out, because I'm pretty sure whoever's got Trevor Lawrence is going to keep him, but it is encouraging. What you saw last year, you would hope that he can expand upon that, or at least extrapolate out the last 5 weeks of the season into a full season. And that would bode well for him.
Yeah, Trevor Lawrence, pretty good at football. Like that's
not bad.
Not bad at all. And I think you're right. I think that we will see him take that next step and continue that maturation. And we have yet to see this guy really even start to come to his ceiling. As far as what quarterbacking in the NFL can look like for him. So I think you're right. I think we do see him take a step forward in both touchdowns. I think we see him probably break the 30 touchdown mark from throwing the football. I think we probably see him up there between probably 43 and 4,500 yards when it's all said and done. I don't know that we necessarily see that 5 touchdown mark, but it wouldn't surprise me to see that drop down to 2 or 3 tutties this season on the ground versus the 5 but him picking that up through the air a little bit. So I think where you're drafting him as QB8, you're kind of drafting him at where his floor is going to be. And I think that the ceiling could be all the way up there in that QB. He could get all the way up into that QB4, QB5, QB, even 3 range. Like all of these things can shake out a little different, little weird there, to the point where it wouldn't surprise me to see him be able to challenge that this season and make some things happen there, especially with all the extra weapons that they have now in Jacksonville. So smash draft, move on.
And I will say this, Jacksonville obviously addressed one of their major needs that they needed to address. And with their first round pick this year, they went out and got a tackle, right? So they are doing their part to try and, make sure that Trevor Lawrence is able to stand back there and be the quarterback that he can't be. And so that's also encouraging. Like Jacksonville recognizes they needed to be better on the line. So what did they do? Went and drafted a tackle.
Love it. All righty. Well, any other thoughts on Trevor Lawrence or the Jacksonville Jaguars?
No. Playoff team? Yeah.
Yeah, I think they win the division.
No problem, right? It's a very, very favorable division for them this year.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody else is going to really be able to challenge them for that in this division. So that's kind of how I see it. All righty. Well, anything else we want to cover, or should we hit to the final thoughts?
Let's go final thoughts.
All righty. What are the final thoughts out there for the viewers and listeners?
Oh, was I starting? We are in the dog days now, right? Like college baseball season's done. It's just Major League Baseball. Next big thing is the All-Star break. Like Derek said, we will be modifying our schedule for next week. So keep it tuned to the socials, and he'll let you know what all those are as we modify our schedule, and that way you guys can stay up with us.
Yeah. Lots of research time, right? Pay attention to what's going on. There is a lot of smoke coming out of camps right now, right? Everybody looks great. Everybody looks wonderful. So be mindful of that. But, be mindful of things, whether it's contract disputes, whether it's players opting not to show up for OTAs. Like all these things do have at least minor, if not major impacts when it comes to their performance in the regular season. So all these little nuggets, if you will, kind of add up. So stay tuned. We'll keep you apprised of all things NFL and fantasy football related. But if you have any questions, hit us up at Good Old Boys FF, wherever your social media takes you.
Absolutely. And do us a favor, head on over to the youtube.com/@goodoldboysff. Click that subscribe button. Help the boys out. That's the best way to support this independent podcast, is over there on the YouTubes. But that's going to do it for us. He's Kevin. He's Alex. I'm Derek. Have a good one. Be safe. Toodle-loos.